Welcome, everyone. My name is Johan Schwind. I'm the Design Director at UrbanX, and I would like you all for joining us today. For those of you who are new to UrbanX and our webinars, UrbanX is a startup accelerator built by Mini and Urbanos, and we're based in New York City. Up to 20 early stage startups every year into 5-month-long cohorts. And we work with them to build their products and brands. We help them gain traction with early customers, and we ensure that they're in a good position to raise follow-on capital. What's unique about UrbanX is that we invest in startups building solutions to specific urban challenges of our times, from better ways to construct buildings to more responsive mobility solutions to urban agriculture. We invest in companies that make cities more efficient, more resilient, and ultimately more livable. I'm really thrilled that I'm joined today by our expert for brand development, Michael Sharp. Michael is a fantastic graphic designer with almost 20 years of experience working for design agencies, large and small, all around the world. Michael has been lecturing graphic design at the Shillington School of Graphic Design in New York City since 2011. And he has co-founded 2 galleries, one in Sydney and one in New York. He's part of our internal expert program at UrbanX, where we work closely with startups in our cohorts to help them build physical products, amazing digital experiences, and powerful brands. In the so-called EIR team, we've worked with over 60 startups so far, and we've developed a lot of kind of practical frameworks to make brand and product development easier for startups. So in this new webinar format that we're starting today, we want to make some of these insights and learnings accessible to you. And because branding is something that matters to any business, whether you're selling to consumers or you're selling to other businesses, whether you're a large or a small business, that's exactly where we're starting with our first session called Beyond the Logo. So data suggests that companies with strong brands consistently outperform their competition, even in times of crisis. You can look at brands like Apple or Nike or BMW, who focus heavily on brand building and in return outperform a lot of their competition. So it would be great if, as a startup, you could tap into that same power that comes with great branding. But early on, resources can be tight for any startup. And as a founder, you have a million other things to worry about. So what we want to do today is have Michael propose a framework for branding that is specifically tailored to startups. And we will literally go beyond the logo by looking at customer needs, brand values, and tone of voice. And in this new framework, the logo ends up being a natural result of a lot of preliminary work rather than the only thing that defines your brand. Throughout this webinar, I will share some useful links and further resources in the chat, so make sure you take a look at those. And we will collect questions from you, the audience, that I will ask Michael in the last 20 minutes of the webinar. So if you have any questions throughout this, make sure you put them in the Q&A box in Zoom, and I will ask them later, and Michael and I will discuss those. And now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Michael to kick off this session.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing okay out there. As Johan said, I work as part of the EIR team for UrbanX, specifically concerned with branding, communication, in its widest possible sense. So what I want to do today is talk about branding, but I want to make the argument that branding is a lot more than a logo or a color palette or a typeface. And I want to make the argument that actually it's far more useful than any of those things. So we've probably all got an idea about what branding is. We could probably give it a go at defining it. So this is branding, right? It's logos, it's colors, it's typography, all of the visual elements, also tone of voice, how do we speak on our social media, within our advertising, on our website, that kind of stuff. And this is branding for sure, but there's a layer below this, which I think is actually the most important part of branding, and also the most interesting, and also the most powerful. And that's really what I'm going to concentrate on today. So as I said, these things, the logo, the color palette, the tone of voice, all of those kind of things, they're built upon, if they're done correctly, on something that lies underneath them. There's two things that lie underneath them, and that's really the power of branding. So we're going to talk about those today in detail, and hopefully I can convince you that they're really important and they're a really useful tool, not to just to guide decisions about which logo to go with. They can do that, but more fundamental strategy decisions about where your business should go. And as I've already said, a brand can help us guide business decisions. It can help us build customer relationships. It can also be a great internal tool to get everyone on board, to make sure that we all know where we're going, and why we're doing something in the first place, why we're coming to work every day, working really hard, what's motivating us. We can differentiate ourselves from our competitors, which is obviously in a crowded marketplace is extremely important, and we can be consistent. So these things go way beyond colors and logos and typefaces. But it's not easy. These things are actually really, really difficult to do. And that's why most people don't do them, particularly when you're at the early stage of your business. This stuff's hard. It gets put in a pile of, I'll do that later. It's too difficult. I need to run my business. I need to keep the lights on, which is completely true. But as I said, if we get this right, if we take the time to think about this and get these fundamentals correct, then it makes our business decisions and our branding decisions so much easier in the long run. So they can actually use it as a tool. But the reason people don't do it is that we need to think about our feelings. Because branding, when it's really, the real power of branding is that it operates on people's feelings. And it's difficult to articulate feelings, it's difficult to think about feelings. And because early stage startups, the founders are so close to the business, it's really, you start to think about it as you. So it becomes very, very personal. But how we communicate informs how people feel about us. So as individuals, the way that we dress, the way that we have our hair, the way that we stand, the adornments we have, how we speak, where we come from, our accent. Do we deliver ourselves with confidence? What's our tone? Do we mumble? Do we shout? Do we stick to our word? All of these things will change the way that people feel about us. And if we think about our brand in terms of personality, which is the way that a lot of people think about brands, which I think is quite useful, we can start to think about how do we want to present ourselves in the world to our customers. And we can decide that. The good news is that we are actually really good at this already. We do this every single day with other people. When we meet a new person, or even a person that we know, we are assessing the communication that they're delivering to us. So that could be non-verbal communication through their gestures, through the way that they dress, the way that they speak. Again, all of these things, we start to build up a picture instantly without thinking about it, about who this person is. So we've got these skills already. It's just very, very difficult to do it for ourselves. And again, when you're the founder of a startup, you're so closely linked to your business that it's so personal to you. So it's very, very difficult to do. So here's some examples of different people. And just think about what this person is. Are they reliable? Are they trustworthy? Where do they come from? What's their political alignment? All of these things we get from this person. How do we feel about them? And this person, the same thing. We're going to make judgments about this person, just in this case, just purely from their visual aesthetic. And this person. And as you probably guessed, it's the same person, right? So we make assumptions about people all the time, and we get a feeling, and these feelings are massively powerful. They dictate pretty much every decision that we make. We think that we are very rational beings, but actually what we're doing is making decisions based on feelings. So these are the words that I came up with to describe the feelings about these different people. Again, your feelings might be different depending on your culture, your background, your personality. All of these things make a difference, right? But we do this. There's no one who isn't making assumptions about people every single day. So we can take that, we can use that knowledge, and we can apply it to products and businesses. So if we abstract it a little bit further and think about water because it's the same product in every bottle, I would argue. I know there's some people out there that say that they could tell the difference between Fiji and Evian, but I would argue that this product is exactly the same. So the product is to quench our thirst. It's to make sure that we are not thirsty anymore. So we go into a store because we're thirsty, but as soon as we are given a choice, so if there's only one bottle of water, there's only one brand of water, there is no choice, right? That's the one that we have to pick. As soon as we're given a choice, then what we're actually picking is we're picking a feeling. So for instance, if I want to feel like I'm more sophisticated than I'm actually feeling at that moment, I might go for Evian because it gives this idea of a European flavor and there's an element of sophistication. If I'm feeling that it's February in New York and I want I want to be a bit tropical, I might go for Fiji. If I'm feeling that I'm a little bit short on cash, then I might go for Poland Spring. And those feelings can change by the hour. So for instance, in the morning, I might have a full bank account and I might be thirsty and then go and buy Fiji, which is a premium product. In the afternoon, I might get a huge tax bill and then suddenly my decisions change because the way I feel has dramatically changed. So I then might pick Poland Spring. Again, these things are based on feeling. We don't articulate these things, we don't think about them, but we feel them in every decision that we make when we're buying a product. And I've worked with many startups over the years, and there's sometimes a attitude that your product is so unique that you don't need any of this, which may be true, but I would argue that it's probably not going to be true for very long. And I would assume that your product isn't unique. We live in a very fast-paced world, and a unique product can become a saturated market very quickly. So this example obviously highlights that. Uber for a while had a completely unique product. They didn't have any competition, but that soon changed. So the reason to use Uber or to use Lyft or any of the other car services is based on a feeling. Why do I want to align myself with Lyft rather than Uber? That's based on many factors. It's based on their brand, their visual identity, but also what they stand for. And obviously Uber has gone through some different changes over the last few months. Okay, so all of this stuff, the logos, the typography, the way that we speak, our tone of voice, if it's done properly, it should sit on a very firm foundation. And there's two elements to that foundation. One is brand values, and the other is our personas. And our personas are basically our idealized customer. And I'm going to go through both of these in some detail to explain what they are, why they're so valuable, and how to get to them. And I want to reiterate that a brand is a decision-making tool. I want to try and convince you that it's not just a set of icons and logos and colors. It is that, but it's far, far more valuable than that. It's really a way that you can make decisions very, very, very easily. So with a set of brand values in place and a really detailed set of personas, you can ask yourself with every decision, whether it's choosing between two logos or whether it's, should I take this, this money from this investor, you can ask yourself, does it align with our brand values, that opportunity? And is it going to resonate with our customer? And if it's yes, then you do it. If it's no, then you don't do it. And again, that's why having brand values and personas that you really, really can stand behind is so important, because then you can use them to make these kind of big decisions. So brand values, these are what we stand for. So if you think about this in terms of a person, so yourself, your core beliefs that are not going to change. So I'm a graphic designer, a creative director. If I suddenly switch careers and become an accountant, that's not going to fundamentally change who I am as a person. I'm going to be perceived differently at parties, but it's not going to change who I am because, you know, I'm 45 years old and it's not going to fundamentally change who I am. So that's what our brand values are. And they are dictated by, they're the driving force that guides every decision you made, as I said before. And they are how you communicate with the things that you find most important. So these are the most important things. This is why you get out of bed in the morning. There's various different ways to do it. As I said, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. There are systematic approaches that you can take. I would highly recommend using an outside person for this. It doesn't have to be someone that you employ necessarily, but having some outside critique of your values would be really valuable. As I said, it's often very difficult for the founders and the core members of the team to do this because you're so close to it. So having a sounding board is really useful. So this is a brief description of the process. We're going to post some links. This is one of the links that we're going to post. It's a detailed process that you can follow yourselves in your teams. Again, I would recommend that it's your core team. I would say don't do this on your own, but also don't do it with 20 people. So maybe 3 or 4 people would be good. The initial stage is to start with the beginner's mind. This is far easier said than done. This is very, very difficult because basically you have to unlearn everything that you've been doing for the last 3, 4, 5 years and to start your business. So again, this is why having some outside input is really important. And then basically you create a long list of values. You can do that in different ways. Again, it's listed in that link. And then you group the values and you highlight them and edit them and basically keep crafting them. The main thing that I want to point out with this is that if you go through this process and you get a set of brand values, it's really important that you don't just see this as a job to do, that you just need to tick off your list. If you've got a set of brand values and they don't mean anything to you, they just look good, it's a complete waste of time doing this. They really need to mean something to you. Your core team, at the very least, they need to mean something to you. So they need to get you excited about continuing this journey. And then hopefully, once you've got that and you can really passionately talk about these brand values and you think, right, these are the things that I'm really, really passionate about, then hopefully you can communicate those to your wider team and obviously to your the wider world and your customers. But if you can't stand behind them, again, this is really not worth doing. So you really need to not stop with this process until you've got something that you can really, really stand behind. And the format doesn't really matter. There's lots and lots of different ways of formatting these. Again, I don't really care about the format. What I'm really interested in is, do you understand what they mean? Can you explain them to me? And can you stand behind them? So in this case for WeWork, they've used personality traits, which is maybe the easiest way to do it. But again, it doesn't really matter which way you do this. So thinking about your brand as a person, and how do you want to be described if someone says to you, oh, I met this great person today, and your friend says, oh, what were they like? Those words are the words that you can use for your brand values. Patagonia, which is a brand that actually so many startups that I talk to reference as being a brand that they really, really like. They've used more action-based values. So they want to build the best product. They want to cause no unnecessary harm. Again, this is a great way to do it too. And then our friends at Google, they've got more statements. And again, they've got 10, right? 10, I would argue, is maybe a little bit too many. I would try and aim for between, I'd think 5 is a pretty good place to land. But again, there is no, this is more of an art than a science. There is no exact number that you need. They need to be as few as possible, but you need to have to cover every single thing that you stand for in your values. Okay, and again, this is very, very, it's easier to say than do, but try to avoid generic kind of corporate speak. So if you Google brand values, you'll get the same old brand values over and over again, and they look great, and you can tick that box, but actually they don't mean anything. They're just words. So what I would encourage you to do is, once you've got your long list or even your short list, really be critical about the words that you've chosen. Can you get to a more precise word? Words are really useful. They're a really useful tool, but they can be ambiguous. So if one of your brand values is sophisticated, let's say, what I see as sophisticated and what you see as sophisticated, or what my mother sees as sophisticated, they're going to be different things, right? So can we get to a more precise word that is less ambiguous? So take that word and think about, what are we actually trying to say with sophisticated? Again, sophisticated is not a very good word, but it's for this example, it works. And once you've got these and you've really, really honed them and you really can stand behind them, then they're your brand values. You may change as a business. You may figuratively put on different clothing, but your core is going to be the same. You're going to be the same person. Okay, so personas. Personas are basically your idealized customer. So we should be asking, is it on brand? Does it align with our brand values? And the other lens that we need to view every decision that we make about our brand and our business is, how would our persona feel about this? So does it fulfill a need that they have? And again, we need to try and take ourselves out of the equation. We're not designing for ourselves. We're not trying to please ourselves. We may be the persona, right? We may be designing for ourselves, but we need to make sure that we're not just picking colors or making business decisions based on our ego or based on what we like or what's currently on trend or a gallery show that we went to see last week. We really need to critically think about, does this fulfill the need, the hopes, desires of our personas? And our personas are basically a kind of a caricature, a simplified version of our idealized customer. We can have one, we can have several. We need to have as few as possible, but we need to cover every distinct type of customer that we're going to have, or every decision maker along our sales path. And the more detailed, the better. So the analogy that I often use is, if you're trying to buy a gift for someone that you know very, very well, you go into the store, you look around, you buy that gift, you buy it with extreme confidence, and you give it to them and they absolutely love it. If you're trying to buy a gift for someone's great auntie that you've never met before, you go into the store, you don't know what to buy, you buy something, you give it to them, they say thank you very much. They don't love it, they don't hate it. They put it in a drawer, they never see it again. That's the death of branding. We don't want to do that. The reason that that happens is because we don't know our personas well enough. We don't know our idealized customers well enough. So we end up in the middle. We don't want to be in the middle. We want to please our personas, and we want to delight them. And then we don't really care about everyone else. And obviously, you know, the argument that I get a lot is that I want to sell to everyone, and that may be the case, but you can't brand to everyone. You basically end up with beige and vanilla, which is, again, is the death of a brand. So our personas are very, very specific. They're a specific person or a specific set of people. And a good way to think about this is that they are the people that our wider customer base wants to be. So they're kind of a better version than themselves. So they are maybe, you know, a bit smarter, a bit better looking, a bit more caring. That's where our brand comes in, to give them those things. So yeah, the person our customer wants to be. So if you think about this in terms of, you know, the person that is presented on Instagram, it's kind of the Instagram version of that person. That's what we're creating for our personas. It's not completely so far away that we can never achieve them. They're just a little bit better in every way. And there's many, many different ways of creating your customer personas. It's really based on knowledge. So I'm hoping that most of you know your customers pretty well. If you don't, you need to talk to them. You need to do research. You need to create a very, very detailed version of this person. So things like how much they earn, where they live, are they married, do they have children, all those basic things, but also where do they get their coffee, what car do they drive, what's their favorite brand. All of those things are going to help us build a very, very detailed picture of that person. And then when I say to you, would they prefer this or this, you can say with extreme confidence that they're going to prefer this version of this logo or this color palette, etc., etc. It's going to make your decision making so much easier in the long run. So this is an example of a persona. Again, there's no fixed way of doing this. We're going to put a link in the comments to show you how to go through this process. This is obviously a very beautifully designed persona document. It doesn't have to be beautifully designed, but there's lots and lots of different ways to do it. But what you really need to take away from this is it has to be detailed. You need to know this person very, very well. And I would argue that if you're struggling to make decisions about your brand, it's because you don't know this person well enough. So you need to do more research. You need to talk to more of them. You need to do surveys. You need to do outreach. You need to ask them and get to know them. So you can do this through your own experience. As I said, hopefully you know them pretty well. You can use your Salesforce to do this. You can do interviews, questionnaires, surveys, that kind of thing. And again, these are the basic things, but you really need to build up a very, very detailed feeling about what makes this person tick. What they aspire to, what's their biggest fear, what do they value. These are the things that they're making decisions based on. They're not really making decisions based on how much they earn or whether they have children. That's a factor, but these how they feel is really the important thing. Another way of doing it, which I find really useful, I mean, I'm a visual person, so this becomes very useful for me, is to create mood boards for your persona. So you could pick a picture of the person that really sums them up. You can start building up a picture of what their apartment or their house looks like, their car, what kind of shoes they wear, what's the interior of their house look like. All of these things start to bring together a picture of this person. So this, if you're a visual person, this can really help. This is a mood board. These are 2 mood boards that we've done at UrbanX for our different startups. And I feel they really help to communicate. And again, because words can be ambiguous, pictures really help break through that ambiguity and get to the root of, you know, does this person drink Budweiser or, you know, a $10 IPA? You know, do they drive a Ford or a Hyundai? You know, these things start to build up a picture about what makes this person tick. And again, just to reiterate, a brand can be a really, really useful decision-making tool. So if you get these two things right, if your brand's sitting on this very, very firm base of your brand values and your personas, then the rest of it will hopefully take care of itself. And again, if you're struggling to make decisions, it's because your brand values are not quite correct, or you don't know your personas well enough. So you have to then go back and revise them. And again, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So again, we need to really think about why we're doing this. You know, it's far, far easier to get a job, get a paycheck every week, and do that. You've chosen to start a business, which is very, very difficult. So you need to be motivated. You need to remind yourself, why are you doing this? What's your mission? And these brand values can really help you do that. So if you're solving big problems, which I hope you are, you need to constantly remind yourself of that, because this journey that you're on, as you already know, is very, very difficult. And you need to motivate yourself first of all, but you also need to motivate, obviously, your team. And, you know, you can think about these terms in terms of purpose. So you can start thinking about purpose statements. You can do that before your brand values. You can do it after. But as Elon Musk says, putting in long hours is hard, but putting in long hours for a cause is a lot easier. So if you've defined that cause, why are you doing something? And again, it's something that we, as founders, we know, but it's hard to articulate. So taking some time to articulate it and get it right will mean that you have solidified it, and you can talk to people about it, and that really helps. So lastly, I just want to talk about Airbnb. When I see early stage startups, this is kind of where they are with their vision statement. So it's very factual. So this is the Wikipedia entry for Airbnb, an online marketplace and hospitality service which allows members to arrange or offer lodging or tourism experiences via our website or mobile app. Factually correct, but not particularly exciting. You're not going to be able to galvanize a team or even a customer base around this kind of statement. So we need to move beyond the factual into the inspirational. So Airbnb have got this tagline, belong anywhere. And they've got this long statement, which I'm going to read quickly. You may or may not agree with the tone of this statement, or you may feel like it's a bit grandiose, which is fair enough. But I think you could, it's hard to argue that it's not more inspiring than what was before. So we used to take belonging for granted. Cities used to be villages. Everyone knew each other and everyone knew they had a place to call home. But after the mechanization and industrial revolution of the last century, those feelings of trust and belonging were displaced by mass-produced and impersonal travel experiences. We also stopped trusting each other, and in doing so, we lost something essential about what it means to be a community. After all, our relationship with people will always be the most meaningful part of our lives. That's why Airbnb is returning us to a place where everyone can feel they belong. Now, again, whether you agree with that or not, it's far more evocative and inspirational than just stating a list of product benefits. So in conclusion, branding is how we feel about your company. It's really important. It's about how people feel. And you can, particularly now, because you're an early stage, you can decide how you want people to feel. So if you think about, if you were going to move to a new city, there's an opportunity to reinvent yourself to a certain extent. And you have that opportunity right now because you are so early to decide how you want people to feel. And that is done through the brand values that you choose and the personas that you develop. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was awesome. Thank you, Michael. Really great presentation. We have a bunch of questions, and a few of them were related to whether this will be available later on. So I already answered that on the Q&A and in the chat. You will be able to look at a recording of this on our website shortly after this at urbanx.com/insights. So if you've missed anything today, or you just want to walk through it again because you want to rebrand your own startup, you can go there and take a look and kind of go through it at your own pace. Cool. So I have a bunch of questions here, and maybe we can just jump in with the first one. This was really focused around building the foundation of your brand. Once you have that, can you give us a couple of pointers on what do I do if I need a website? Like what's a good approach and an efficient approach for me as a startup if now I have all of this, now I have this great foundation. How do I turn this into an asset like a website?
You're in a lot stronger position than 10 years ago. There's lots and lots of tools out there that are really easy, particularly for website design. Obviously, Squarespace is the most famous. I would say I would highly recommend not doing it yourself. I know it's really tempting because it is so easy, but I would try, if you can, to dig into your bank account and try and allocate some money, even if it's just one day of design help for your website. Maybe what you can do is you can create a Squarespace account and you can get all the content in there. So the designer doesn't have to do all of that. So you can do all the kind of the heavy lifting. So get the content in there, do it as well as you can. But what happens, particularly if you're someone who kind of likes tinkering with design stuff, you can spend so much time tinkering with your website, and it's really not the best use of your time. So what I would say is really limit the amount of time that you spend. So maybe give yourself a day and say, okay, I'm going to spend today, a Saturday, let's say, and I'm going to work on my website. I'm going to get all the content in there and I'm going to get it to as far as I can in that day. And then I would try and find a designer that you can afford. And designers go from the very, very cheap to the very, very expensive. So you should be able to find someone that you can afford and get them to then apply your brand to your website and think about it with a designer's eye. So alignment, hierarchy, all of that kind of stuff. Because if you start messing with it, before you know it, you've spent 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month on your website, and it's really, really a bad use of your time as a founder. So that would be my advice.
Great. We have another question from Starling Child. Starling is actually founder of one of our companies, CitySense, Cohort 2. Thanks for joining. He is wondering, and this is related to B2B startups, which is interesting because we talked a lot about B2C today. So this is focused around B2B, where you're building a tool that solves a highly specific kind of job need, like a professional need for your user. And he's wondering how you determine or how you factor that into the branding process, and whether you want to shift the focus a little bit from maybe understanding less of the hobbies of the user and more of the professional needs. How do you navigate that, and how do you find the balance there?
Yeah, well, I think actually the fundamentals are exactly the same. Um, I think that an operator who's using your product, they're sitting in a city office, and they're doing something. They want to, obviously they have specific needs and desires. So if their work is very, very complicated and very, very confusing, you need to offer something that's very, very simple. So having a brand that is very clean and minimal and organized and that kind of thing would be the way to go. It's difficult for anyone to not bring themselves to work. So, if they are really into a particular brand outside of work, that's useful to know, because and on the opposite to that, if they are really anti a particular brand or a particular lifestyle, if they feel that the startup world is full of people in cities who are very metropolitan, and they've got a particular lifestyle, and they are a bit snooty, and they look down on the rest of us. If you present your brand with that classic kind of startup Silicon Valley flair, it's going to put them off, right? So you're going to have a lot harder time convincing that person that your tool is the right tool for them. So it might be the best tool ever, and it might function really well, but you've annoyed them by the way you present yourself, right? So again, I would argue that you can't know too much about this person. So it's good to know them at work, but it's equally good to know them at home, because again, you can't separate those two things.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Shikar Madan. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. And he is wondering if there is a particular order in which you should think about your persona and your brand value. Like, do you do that at the same time? Is there a sequence to it? What's the best way to do that?
There's no sequence. You need to know both of them. I would say, which is easiest? Maybe do the one that you feel is easiest and get that done. There's no one of they kind of inform each other. So yeah, you can do either. I would say the brand values feels a little bit harder, and maybe is a little bit more difficult. The persona work, I think you're probably closer to knowing what that is, hopefully. I would say do whichever you think you can maybe get done first, because then you feel good about doing that thing.
Great. And then I think another thing that's often a question for our startups is how do you get to your brand assets? How do you deal with photography? How do you deal with, maybe you want some video? You need typefaces, you need all of those things. What's some good advice that you can give the startups for doing that efficiently?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one, because ideally you would want someone who is a designer to be looking at this stuff. It may not be possible, so then it's up to the core team to do these things. I would say that's not ideal, and you're not probably best placed to do that. But if you really don't have the funds to get a designer on board, then you really need to look critically at your brand values and try to interpret those brand values in the decisions about typefaces and photography and colors. Now, if we're trying to align brand values with a typeface, that can be quite difficult, right? That can be, that might take some training to do that. It's possible, but I would highly recommend trying to allocate some resources to get in a professional to do it for you. Even if it is, okay, we've got you know, a few $100s. What can we do for a few $100s? And maybe it's getting a designer to work for half a day or a day. There are some, so 99 Designs, you can use platforms like that are relatively inexpensive to get logos done for you. You can pull favors, obviously, with creative people that you know, maybe do a bartering system. But again, I would highly recommend trying to get someone who at least has some kind of visual eye, and hopefully are professional creatives, professional designers to look at it. And again, it's difficult because obviously resources are stretched, but I would try, if you can, to go down that road.
Great. We have a number of questions around allocating funds towards branding, early stage. And I know this is a little bit of a difficult question. I don't know if we can find a good answer here, but I thought I would ask it, like, given the fact that, you know, as a startup, you can be stretched very thin, especially in the seed stage. How do you think about allocating funds for branding?
So how much to allocate?
How much? Is there a percentage? Is there a rule of thumb? Is it different between, you know, consumer and B2B?
No, I mean, it's basically trying to, there's sometimes a false economy, right? Of, you know, you get what you pay for, unfortunately. And there's ways of being, as I've just described, there's ways of being scrappy. And, you know, I would say, you know, you probably, to get a branding package done in New York, you're probably looking at, you know, 10 grand, 15 grand. But you can do it a lot cheaper than that. But you have to look at your network. You have to be, you know, maybe go to locations that are cheaper. So again, using things like 99 Designs and that kind of stuff. It's really finding the best possible person for your budget. So I would be realistic. I would work backwards from how much you think you can, you know, realistically allocate, bearing in mind you've got all of these other things to allocate to, and say, if we've got $200, we've got $200. What can we do for $200? If you've got, you know, $2,000, what can we do for that? And try and get the biggest bang for your buck. And again, if it's you know, the school that I teach at Shillington, you know, maybe you go to design schools and you ask them, you know, maybe a recent graduate would love to do a branding project to build their portfolio. Maybe they will do it for a lot cheaper for creative control. Having said that, then you've got two people who don't really know what they're doing with branding, right? So that can be very, very difficult. But yeah, if you've got $500, you can do something, but you do get what you pay for, unfortunately. So my biggest recommendation would be to not design anything that you don't need. So, you know, you potentially need a logo. You know, maybe you just need a very, very simple logo initially, and then you can start building from there. You need a website. What do you need on your website? Maybe it's a very, very simple one-page website. Do you need business cards? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Do you need, you know, people get very carried away with designing stuff for brands, and it's a lot of stuff they don't need, you know, so really be critical. What do we need right now? What's a critical thing, and everything else can come later. But I think having that kind of audit would be really useful.
Yeah, that's great advice. Let's see, we have some other questions. Question where the person is asking, you know, or saying this is seems a little bit focused on, you know, the digital startup world, and they're wondering whether it's different for you know, startups in clean tech or in manufacturing. I have to say that we do actually have a lot of companies in the clean tech and the manufacturing space and the business to industry or business to business space. So, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that, where you see differences and where you see maybe similarities.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception that the consumer goods or tech focused products are all about branding, and that's where the main focus is. But this process, as I explained in the talk, it's really less about logos and colors and typefaces and all that kind of stuff. It is about that, but what it really is thinking about, what do you stand for as a business? Like, what do you really want to stand for? Like, everyone is in a competitive market. So if you're selling solutions for the steel industry, and you're going up against 5 other competitors, you need to differentiate yourself. You need to know why you're doing this thing. Again, as I said, you need to understand, why am I getting up every morning, working really hard, going through this journey? Like, what am I actually doing? But also, when you're communicating to the person who is going to buy your product for their steel plant, you need to talk to them in their language, right? So if you have if you're younger than the average demographic that works in steel, there's a perception that you are inexperienced, that you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe your business is a lot younger than the businesses that you're competing against. So you need to think about, okay, how do we solve those problems? So branding and the way you present yourself can make up for those deficiencies, right? So your brand can feel a lot more established than it is. It can feel more traditional than it is. It can feel that it's bigger than it is. Again, without making any promises that you can't keep. But again, these things are about perception, right? So if you turn up and have your negotiation with the steel plant owner, and you turn up in a particular way of dressing, again, if you get that wrong, he's not going to talk to you. So if you turn up dressed like someone who works, someone that he could go for a drink with, that's going to help a lot, right? And if you talk in his language, that's also going to help a lot. So those things need to be reflected in your brand as well. So I would say that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. We live in a world where that people make decisions. They make decisions obviously based on cost and all of that kind of stuff. But if the cost is the same and your competitors are delivering exactly the same product, then what they're buying is your brand. And that comes from you. It comes from the way you present personally. It comes from your business card. It comes from your website. It comes from all of these things.
Great. So another question here is, and maybe you can speak to this because you have a lot of agency experience, is if I have set aside a little bit of money and I've decided to do my rebrand as a startup, how do I go about choosing an agency? What's a good process of doing that effectively and ending up with the right agency that will do the best job?
So I would start with agencies that are in your city or in your geographical location if you can, because it's going to be a lot easier, and they're going to be a lot more focused on you if you're there, and you can go and have a meeting with them and get a vibe for what it is that they do. So that's the first thing. If you can't, then that's not ideal, but it's possible. So I would look in your local area. If you live in New York, obviously there's a million agencies in New York, and then I would look at brands that you like and see who did those. It doesn't have to be in your industry. Agencies tend to get a little bit pigeonholed. If they only do beauty, that's what they do. If they only do digital, that's what they do. But you can look at other brands that you really like their branding and do some investigation and find out what their agency was, and then have a meeting with them and see what they can do for you. That would be probably the best approach. And again, don't be afraid to try and negotiate on price. Again, I don't want to do myself out of profit here, but if they like you and they like the project, as a creative, obviously you have to make money, but we're also driven by cool creative projects. So if we feel that we can do something really great that's going to be in our portfolio, or it's going to lead to other work, then there might be some negotiation on price. And again, maybe you do it in terms of, okay, let's do this bit first. And, you know, after a year, when we've raised, after 2 years, we'll do the next bit, and you get a relationship with that agency. But I think getting the right fit is really important, because ideally you want to do it once. You don't want to do it again. So taking your time and making sure the fit is right for you and for them, I think is the main thing that you need to get right.
Fantastic. Michael, thanks so much. We're up on time.
Okay.
I've learned a lot today. I hope everyone else did too. Do you have any last bits of wisdom for us before we close?
Yeah, I mean, my main takeaway from all of this is that this is hard. It's difficult to do, and if you're struggling with it, that's okay. It's normal to do that. But once you've done it, it's going to make your life so much easier. And again, if you can start to think about branding, not just in terms of pretty pictures and colors and all that kind of stuff, if you can really think about it as a tool to make decisions for your business, then I think you will start to understand why it's important to go through the pain of creating your brand values, particularly. But once they're done, you're going to be in a lot better position to make decisions moving forward.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We will, again, like I said earlier, we will post the recap on urbanx.com/insights if you want to take another look. To stay in touch and up to date on our upcoming webinars and events and anything else that's going on at UrbanX, please subscribe to our newsletter at urbanx.com/subscribe. And I really hope to see you all again in one of our next webinars. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.